got there. Drove to their house, and they drove us to San Diego, where we watched the Padres and the Yankees. That was pretty cool, and it was military day, so all the, about 2,000 soldiers marched in, and that was just, and they, everybody gave them a standing. Oh, it was awesome. And we went swimming, we went to the beach, we went to went to the movies, dinner, and went to Disneyland. What could be better? Well, we went to Disneyland, and they decided to hit the big rides early. Casey and Rhonda have season tickets, and so, hey, he had it all planned out, all that way. And so we went to Thunder Mountain Railroad. So you guys have been on that. And I was just feeling just a shade queasy anyway when I woke up, one of those. Rode a big mountain right away, and I don't know what it was. I just wasn't quite, enjoying it as much as I should, I suppose. And then they immediately said, hey, let's go to Space Mountain, or Star Wars Mountain, whatever it is. Great. And so we went right there. They had a fast pass. We ran on, and they kept saying, now, Chuck, if you don't have to ride it if you're not feeling, no, I'm fine. Everything's going to be great. I realized as soon as I got strapped in, I made a wrong mistake. And if you've ever been on there, you know that it's pitch black, which really doesn't help much. Like that. I opened my eyes, and that made it worse, actually. Unfortunately, it made it worse. And so here's a picture how much I enjoyed it there. There I was, right in the end. It was just, my sickness only lasted about 3 or 4 hours. And it's a good thing because Disneyland's only $105 per person, so I really felt like I was getting my money's worth. And so... Disneyland does not give refunds. I almost gave a refund, however, I want you to know. I didn't do it, but it was not as enjoyable of a day as I would hope it would have been. Not to be compared in any way with my day at Disneyland. I'm sure many of you are aware of the story of Job. We're not going to talk a whole lot about him, but we know that in one day he lost sons and daughters, his house, his wealth, animals, most everything. And not long after that, of course, he had he was inflicted with a terrible disease, and he had all kinds of boils and junk all over him, and he started to scrape it with broken pottery. And then to add insult to injury, many of his so-called best friends came and started to blame him for his own trouble. With friends like these, who needs enemies? And so they really piled on, and he was feeling mighty low. And even his wife said, why don't you just curse God and die? But I love these verses in Job 19. Job's talking, and he says, my relatives have failed. That's what he said. And my close buddies have forgotten me. My breath is offensive to my wife. I don't know if he did the smell check, but everything was bad, and I am repulsive, he said, to the children of my own body. So perhaps he had some small children that didn't die. Even young children, he said, despise me. All my close friends actually abhor me, he said, which means that they just can't stand me. And all those whom I love have turned against me. Wow, how about that? But here's the thing that really hits me about this particular story in this particular verse. He speaks with a voice of absolute faith despite all that he can see with his own eyes. And here's what he has to say in Job 19, 23 and 25. Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed on a book, that they were engraved on a rock with an iron pen and led forever. And you know what he wanted inscribed on this rock in spite of all the hell he was going through? For I know that my Redeemer lives. That's what he said. I want that inscribed on stone. I know that my Redeemer lives in spite of everything my buddies have told me, in spite of everything circumstances have told me. I know that my Redeemer lives, and oh, by the way, he shall stand at last on the earth. And in my flesh I'm going to see God, for I know that my Redeemer lives. Notice he said the word my Redeemer lives, he said. Anybody ever eat at Sing Sing's? Remember Sing Sing's? Right? The buffet with the mostest. I mean, Oh, it was so tasty. My mouth waters just thinking about it right now as I speak it. I'm so sad it went out of business. But I would go in there, and if you remember, when you first walked in, they had a giant Buddha statue there, and there would always be food, and there would always be soup and in front of the Buddha. And nicest lady, really always sweet. And one time I went in there, and I said, so why do you have food placed in front of this statue? And she said, because the Buddha needs it. The Buddha wants it, it's right for the Buddha. And I was thinking, man, don't you realize he's not alive? But our Redeemer lives. Our Redeemer. Can you say, my Redeemer lives? Let's all say it. My Redeemer lives. Job actually went so far as to say he wanted it engraved on stone. And he spoke out this phrase. And what he did when he spoke it out, in spite of all the circumstances around him, he was engraving it on his heart. There's something attached to, the heart is somehow attached to the mouth. And he, in spite of everything he could see, in spite of his misery, in spite of everybody hating him and his wife telling him to curse God and die, my Redeemer lives. I'm going to say it out. I don't care what's going on around me. I don't care what the hell is happening around me, regardless of circumstances. We're going to show a short clip of, I just saw it this morning and I had to show it. It kind of goes right along with it, about a kid who was kidnapped, and you're going to see how he responded.
A 10-year-old is abducted from right in front of his home in Atlanta, Georgia, only to be released a few hours later. And you will not believe how he got the kidnapper to let him go. Trace Gallagher knows. Trace?
He did it by singing, Megan. It really has become the song heard round the world, and police say it may very well have saved the life of 9-year-old Willie Myrick. Willie says he was in his front yard. He bent down to pick up some money, and that's when someone grabbed him, threw him in their car, and took off. Listen now to 9-year-old Willie Myrick.
I didn't know what he was doing until he, grabbed me, and he drove me off to East Point. He told me he wouldn't hear a word from me, so I ain't say nothing.
Oh, he didn't talk. Instead, he started singing a gospel song called Every Praise. Willie says the man cursed at him, telling him to shut up, but he kept singing for 3 hours until the man finally stopped the car and told him to get out. The boy ran to a nearby home, asked the homeowner to call his guardian. By that time, police were already canvassing the city and quickly picked him up, saying the song saved him. Now, listen to Willie sing the song on a local radio station.
Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship with one accord. Every praise is to our God.
And he was saying, shut up.
Yeah.
Everybody's heard it. Willie Myrick even got to meet Hezekiah Walker, the Grammy winner who actually wrote Every Praise. Police still do not have any leads on the suspect. They're hoping the sketch we showed you earlier.
Regardless of the circumstances around him, every praise is from my Redeemer lives is what he was saying. I don't care what you're doing, my Redeemer lives. Shut up, my Redeemer. Quiet, you lives. All right, get out of the car. My Redeemer lives. In the end, Job's losses were redeemed twice over, right? He was a wealthy guy, and he lost everything, only to have twice in the end. Our Redeemer lives. And God's always been a Redeemer. Exodus 6:6, it says this, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. God was saying this, I'm going to set you free. I'm going to pay your ransom. I'm going to release you from bondage. I will redeem you. Now, the word redeem in the Old Testament comes to us from the word, one of the ways is the word goel in Hebrew, which actually means a kinsman redeemer. And in Hebrew, it means coming to the help or rescue of another person. I love the story, a true story of an old guy who was, or the true old story, not necessarily an old guy, but he was driving on a road, a country road, when his car just chugged to a stop, and he opened up the hood, and unfortunately he knew about as much about cars as I do. And I guess he thought by looking at the hood it would just somehow fix itself. And he began jiggling wires and things like that. And then this beautiful brand new car showed up, and there was a driver and there was a guy, an old guy sitting in the back, and the old guy got out of the car and he said, "Are you having problems, sir?" And he said, "Yeah, I don't know how to get this thing started." And he goes, "You got a screwdriver?" And he said, "Yeah." He just twisted for just a few seconds some things and fired up, and it did. It fired right up. He goes, "Thank you, sir. What is your name?" "My name is Henry Ford," he said. "And I think I know how Fords should operate." How do you know Jesus made you? And Jesus knows how to tinker with you to get you at your best. Well, the book of Ruth tells a story about a guy named Boaz, which is kind of a fun name, I guess, and he came to the rescue of a hurt, bitter woman named Naomi. And Naomi was Boaz's sister-in-law, actually. And she had been married, by all appearances, had been married to a very well-to-do guy. And he did very well for himself, and he was pretty wealthy, and obviously very well-known family. If you bother to read the book of Ruth, you'll see it's a very short book, but I just want to read a few passages from the book of Ruth, beginning in chapter 1. And it kind of sets the table for the Redeemer, Boaz, to come, and a kinsman redeemer, how he redeemed Naomi, and inevitably Ruth and Naomi. And so it begins in verse 1 of chapter 1 of Ruth, and it says, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to dwell in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. The name of the wife was Naomi. The names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were from Bethlehem, and they went to the country of Moab and remained there. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and then she was left, and her 2 sons. And now her 2 sons took wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah." By the way, Oprah Winfrey was supposed to be named after Orpah, but they misspelled it on the birth certificate, if you didn't know that. But Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. But then Mahlon and Chilion also died, and the women survived her 2 sons and her husband. And then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard that in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread. Therefore she went out from the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And then Naomi goes on to tell her daughters-in-law, "Hey, go back to your old country. Go back there. Don't stay here. Go find yourself some husbands. Get a life. Don't stay with me. Don't be with me." And Orpah decides to go ahead. She loved Naomi, but obviously, and she cried as she went back. But Ruth said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying with you." And then we see in Ruth 1, 20 and 21, it says, Naomi said to them, when she finally got back into Bethlehem, and everybody apparently knew her, and they began, "Hey, could this possibly be Naomi?" And then she said to them, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." You see how Job was dealt bitterly with. And then Naomi says, "God has dealt very bitterly with me. All of a sudden, I'm miserable." And actually, she said, "Don't call me Naomi. Instead, call me Mara." Mara means bitter. Naomi means beautiful, pleasant, and agreeable. Don't call me that. I'm miserable. She was formerly well off with an influential family, but now she's broke, she's bitter, and she's barren. And oh, by the way, she's pretty ticked at God, too. Well, this short book of Ruth begins with 3 funerals and ends with a wedding. It starts with a famine, it ends with abundance. It begins with a bitter woman, And it ends with that same bitter woman becoming a blessed great grandma of King David. God can take, or how many of you believe God can take the bitter and he can make it beautiful? Anybody think that? You guys know that, right? Their house burned down, what, a year or two ago now? I just asked them how their new house is. They say it's awesome. And it's better than it was even before. God can take the bitter and he can make it beautiful. I believe he will. And he can make it whole and healed again. How do you think life is awfully short? Right? I mean, I'm 55 and it seems so short now. And when I was 20, it seemed, oh man, yeah, I've been around a long time. Now it just seems, wow, it's getting, the clock is ticking. But you know how super short life is when you hold bitterness in your heart? You ever heard the saying, life is too short to be bitter. Life is too short to hold grudges. Life is too short to hold on to stuff. Well, she'd been holding on to this anger and bitterness. Don't even call me blessed. Call me bitter, she said. That's how she was. Now, you might get to heaven if you're bitter, but your life on earth is going to be unnecessarily miserable. In the meantime, how many of you guys would rather be happy than miserable? Anybody in here? Or pleasant than miserable? Good, good. Okay, I knew I was in the right room. But still, sometimes doesn't it just feel good to be bitter for a little while? You ever notice that? Am I the only one? Just for maybe a second or two? Isn't that a good feeling? You imagine taking out punishment on that person or somebody? Am I the, oh, come on, you bunch of liars. I mean, it feels good, but then it doesn't feel good. And it churns and it feels miserable. And you just know I shouldn't hold on to this. And every time you think of that person that's making you mad, well, that's a way to be miserable. You know, it's like when Jesus comes in your life, you've been given a first-class ticket to heaven. But bitterness suddenly pushes you back into coach. You know, anybody here fly first class ever? And now that you have, do you ever want to go back to coach if you can help it? No. Now, how many of you guys usually fly coach? That's me. I'm just lucky they let me on the plane, personally. And some people settle. They should be in first class. They're settling for being in coach because they're miserable. They're holding grudges. They're holding offenses. They're mad. They're mad at God. They're mad at circumstance. They're mad at their parents. They're mad at their teacher. They're mad at their coaches. They're mad at their boss. They're mad. They're just mad. And they let circumstances dictate their life. And then there's others who think that God owes them something. They're not willing to pay any price at all. You know, successful people, I want to, that guy, somebody just gave him all that success. No, they probably paid a big price. You just don't see it. And some people aren't willing to pay the price. They pay a coach price and they want to be in first class. That reminds me, on a plane bound for New York, the flight attendant approached a beautiful blonde sitting in first class and requested that she move to coach since she didn't have a first class ticket. The blonde replied, I'm young, I'm beautiful, I'm going to New York, and I'm not moving. And she didn't know what to do to get her moved, so she went to the co-pilot, and the co-pilot came and talked to her, ma'am, you're going to have to go to, coach because you don't have a first class ticket. She said, I'm young, I'm beautiful, I'm going to New York, and I'm not moving. And then they said, oh, I got to tell the captain. They went to the captain, and the captain came and whispered something in her ear. She got up immediately and went back to coach in her seat, and she started muttering under her breath, why didn't you just say so? And then the flight attendant and the co-pilot asked the captain what he whispered in her ear. He said, I told her first class wasn't going to New York. True story. No, I don't know if it's a true story. You know what the price for a first class ticket to heaven is? Living in forgiveness. You don't have to live in misery. You know, when you live in unforgiveness, you're living in torment. And Naomi made the big mistake of saying, Almighty God, I started with a whole lot and he took it all away. He left me empty. And I'm mad about it. But if you want a first-class ticket, you live in forgiveness, whether you just do. You just release and you receive God's forgiveness for you. You receive God's love for you. One of the reasons people fly in coach and they should be in first class is because they're just so they don't understand that God really does love them. I mean, he really loves you. And when you start to sense God's love for you, not because you're so wonderful, he just loves you because he's so wonderful, and he does see you as wonderful. And he forgives, and he loves, and he wants us to receive his love, which will make us want to obey him because we know we can trust him, which will make us want to enjoy him and be with him, our Redeemer. And this is what Boaz actually says about himself as he talks with Ruth. He says this in Ruth 3. You don't have to turn here, but Ruth 3, kind of skipping some verses here, 12 and 13. He says this, and now it is true that I am a redeemer. This is what Boaz is saying about himself. As the Lord lives, I'm going to redeem you. Boaz, Naomi's kinsman redeemer, Jesus, our kinsman redeemer. 3 things about redeeming really quickly as we move on here in the next few minutes. First of all, did you know that our Redeemer is related to us? Our Redeemer who lives is related to you. Boaz was the brother of Naomi's deceased husband. His role was to redeem her. In other words, he was to marry his deceased brother's wife and pay off all of her debts so that she could have kids. And this family could live on sort of in a sense through Boaz. That's what it was in the Old Testament. That's what kinsman redeemer did. They had to be kin. They had to be kinfolk. They had to be related. And a kinsman redeemer was to be the closest living male relative of the one being redeemed. He didn't actually marry Naomi. She was past child rearing years apparently. And so he didn't marry her, but instead married Ruth, her daughter-in-law. And of course they went on to she had a child named Obed, which means servant, who became the father of Jesse, who became the father of King David. Boaz was related. Well, Jesus actually became a member of our family when he humbled himself and he became a human. Okay? He entered into life the same way we do. He endured the same heartaches, the same temptations, the same betrayals. He ate the same food. He went to the bathroom in the same way. You know, he was just like us. In fact, it says in Romans 8:3, he was born in the likeness of sinful flesh. He wasn't a sinner, but he was born in the likeness of sinful flesh. He became our kin. He became a kinfolk. And so really what happened is a new family has been created by the intervention of our great God, our kinsman redeemer, our goal, Jesus. And we are then adopted into God's family and so are children of God and fellow heirs with Christ. So first of all, our Redeemer is related to us just like Boaz was related to Naomi and Ruth. Secondly, membership has its privileges. Being a member of God's family has privileges. Naomi really figured that God has turned his back on her. And she in turn, of course, became bitter, which happens a lot in today's world, right? A lot of people used to sort of walk with God, and, you know, they've just walked away. They're bitter. You know, God didn't come through. The church hurt me. God hurt me. You know, this happened, and they walk away. Well, Naomi's was the same way. People really haven't changed much. And she was actually heading almost on purpose to a life of miserable loneliness, but Ruth stuck by her. Through thick and thin, she stood with her. How many of you would like to feel like if you're falling, there's going to be somebody there to catch you? If you're running away, somebody's going to grab you and say, hold on a minute, buddy. I'm not going to let that happen to you. I'm not leaving. Go! Leave me alone! I'm not. That's one reason to be in church. It's one reason to be in home group. You want to have people there who can catch you. Let someone get to know you. Let somebody in your vault. Some of us are really good at hiding all kinds of stuff in our vault. thinking that, oh, if they only knew what was in my vault, they would never love me. It's not true. They would probably love you more because they're thinking, you're kind of like me. You know, now I can relate to you. You're going to develop friendships that'll stick with you and help you in good times and bad. And Ruth said to Naomi, wherever, and it's like a song, as you know, you sing at weddings, or used to anyway, whither thou goest, I will go. You know, it's kind of a wedding song. It was actually Ruth talking to Naomi. I don't care where you're going. I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to stick with you. Now, Naomi didn't see this trouble coming. She was probably wealthy. She had a good family. There was food in the fridge. She had satellite TV. Life was good. Nothing could possibly go wrong. A lot of people think that way. A lot of people in America think that way. But you know, trouble, I'm not saying this is going to be, but trouble can happen at any time.
I got robbed by a sweet old lady on a motorized cart. I didn't even see it coming.
Naomi didn't see it coming. All of a sudden, her husband's gone. Her sons are gone. She has nothing. James writes this, a very sobering word. He says, come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded. You say, boy, that sounds like Old Testament. This is in the New Testament. Don't count on riches to get you through the day. No matter what, Ruth stood with her. And Naomi kept saying, no, don't. Go away. Get away from me. I'm miserable and I want to be miserable. No, whither thou goest, I will go. You know, have you noticed that hurting people often repel the very people that can help them? Yeah. Ever notice that? Yeah. And those people who just say, leave me alone, leave me alone. Well, sometimes you do, but you never forget them in your prayers. You just think about them, you call them, you text them, you care for them. A kinsman redeemer or a goel also meant a blood avenger. And here's the idea that if something happens to the family, I'm going to take care of it. Somebody does something to you, they do something to the whole family, see? You're not getting this? Oh, yeah, okay. You're sitting there. What, are you scared? What, are you bored? You want more air conditioning? What's your problem? I probably got to put some cotton balls in next service. I can tell that's really going to help this get across. A kinsman redeemer, if something happened to the family, I'll take care of him. Jesus, our kinsman redeemer, is going to take care of the devil. And it's going to be ugly. Get over here, you. He's going to hammer him, and then he's going to step on him a little bit, and then he's going to toss him into hell to burn forever. Our kinsman redeemer is a blood avenger. Vengeance is mine, I'm going to repay, says the Lord. Membership in God's family has privileges. We get another set of eyes. How many of you guys know that married men here know that it's good to have your wife around? She sees things you can't see. Especially my clothing. You know, she sees things. Typically Sunday morning, she lays out my pants and my shirt. It's like garanimals, you know. And it's nice. But we need another set of eyes. And being in a family, being together with other people, it's a privilege to have other people speak into your life. You may not always want to hear it, and it may drive you nuts, but the truth is they see things you can't see. We need another set of eyes. Last week, too, the last week of our vacation, we went to California the first week. The second week, we went camping in Skimwalkaway and Vista Park, and we're there, and we decided to rent some paddle boards. And I don't know, they're the ones you stand on, and you're kind of paddling while you're standing, right? So we went in the Columbia River, and it was windy, and it was pretty howling. And so Max and I, Max, my young athletic son, goes out there, and he falls once, and the rest of the time he's, and I'm just sitting there hoping I'm not going to. Well, then we got into this cove that seemed to be pretty calm. And I thought, I had some athletic bones in my body at one time. Why don't I stand? Boom, and my brand new pair of $550 worth of glasses ended up in the murkiness on the bottom of the Columbia River. So if you're ever there and you see a pair of glasses that come up, make sure to give me a call. The good news is, because I told Nancy, you're going to have to drive home. You're going to have to drive the trailer and all that home. And she goes, I don't want to do that. And I looked in the truck, and to my the good news was I actually kept my old pair, and I left it in there. It's nice to have an extra set of eyes. Huh? Right? Good to have an extra set of eyes. And it got me through until these babies came in, and now I'm just feeling really good. Hurt the wallet a little bit, but life goes on. But it made for a good illustration, so I guess I don't know it's worth $550, but still, it's worth something. We need another set of eyes is the point. And being a member of God's family, that's one of the great privileges. You have other people to speak into your life. Speak value into your life. Speak love into your life. Speak some correction into your life. Be there. Be like a Ruth to a Naomi. I'm not going anywhere. It seems like most every week I hear from somebody in our body who tells me that they've been healed, or they've been touched by the Lord, their knee, their foot, their, Parkinson's, I mean, it's just amazing how God has been touching people, healing people. And one of the good news about being a part of the body of Christ, you have other people praying for you, thinking about you, caring for you, and God is moving in it, and it's awesome. And of course, I'm kind of speaking to the choir here, but for those of you that aren't regularly here, man, I encourage you to come and be a part of it. Shelley goes to our church, and she was telling me that she lost her purse, and most women, it was actually stolen from her car, and most women, shudder at that thought, and she had some cash and credit cards, and she just said, I'm just gonna have peace about it, and she just started praying, and wouldn't you know, a couple days later, somebody texted her, hey, did you lose a purse? And she got it back. Nothing was in it, of course. No, it was all there. There was a little bit of cash gone, but aside from that, everything else was back. Our Redeemer, who we are related to, cares for all aspects of your life. He cares for your physical. He cares for your mind. He cares for your wallet. He cares for your spiritual life. He cares for your emotional life. Our Redeemer cares for every aspect of your life. And being one of God's family members means that our Redeemer gives us authority as well. Here it says in Luke 9:1, and he called the 12 together, and he gave them power. He gave them authority over all demons to cure diseases. And Jesus actually is quoted this way. He says, behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. Membership has privileges. And the third thing about our Redeemer is that our Redeemer paid the price in full. In the ancient world, men, women, and children were they were bought and sold, they were traded, they were owned and purchased and put to work. They could be handed down from one generation to another generation in Bible times. You might be born into slavery, you might go into debt and legally become a slave. You might be captured by an army and taken as a slave as part of the booty. If you became a slave in the days of the Bible, there were only two ways you could ever be freed from slavery. You could be, a condemned man might have enough money eventually to pay a price that would purchase his own freedom, and that purchase price is called redemption. That's what it's called. The purchase price is redemption. But most often, you were in slavery and somebody took pity on you. They purchased you out of slavery. Then they, having purchased you, they paid the price, and they paid it in full. And if they chose to, they could make you work for them as a slave, but in some cases, They had pity on you, and they would pay the price in full, and then they would set you free. And that's what our Redeemer did. He paid the redemption's price for you and I. So to redeem, this is a quote now, to redeem means to see a slave, to pay a price, to take them off the market. It's literally what it means, and to set them free. It's actually a divine exchange. One man pays the price so another man can go free. It's a classic Christian viewpoint. It really is at the center of the gospel. Jesus paid the price so that you could be free. Instead of our death, he died. And Jesus became then our kinsman redeemer. He came as a human. He became a part of our family. He gave us privileges, and then he paid the entire price. Going back to the story of Ruth just for a second as I close. Now there was another male relative who was actually closer to Naomi than Boaz was, and he had the first right to be a redeemer of Naomi and Ruth. But once it was all laid out, all the things he'd have to pay for and all the things he'd have to do, he said, I'm going to pass. And then Boaz happily stepped up, I'm going to pay the entire price. Boaz is often seen as a picture of Jesus many hundreds of years before he came. He's a picture of our Redeemer. He paid the full price. And then he went on, of course, to marry Ruth, and they had kids. And he did it very happily. And it's a reminder that our God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He has plenty of wealth. He's plenty able to meet your needs, financial or otherwise, and he is interested in redeeming the whole you. The question is this morning, do you know that your Redeemer lives? All two of you? Do you know that your Redeemer lives? And here's how it closes, almost closes in Ruth 3:17. Love this verse. Before they got married, Boaz and Ruth, he said, then Ruth told Naomi everything Boaz had done for her, and he added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley. Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Naomi said, I started full, but the Lord took away everything, and now I'm empty-handed. And then Boaz, the Redeemer, says, don't go back to her empty-handed. No, go back full. And it was about 80 pounds of barley, and somehow she was able to carry it. I guess I don't know if they were just extra strong back then. The point is, the empty Naomi became full again. And that's really the central point of the book of Ruth anyway. The empty becoming full. The bitter becoming happy and joyful and fulfilled. The empty becoming full. The hopeless becoming hopeful. The unloved becoming loved. The anxious full of peace. The joyless full of joy. The ones who don't sense the presence of the Lord now suddenly are sensing the full presence of God. The poor receiving the vast riches of Christ. Does anybody here feel like you're running on empty? If that's you, would you just stand this morning if you feel like you're running on empty? Anybody here? Maybe you feel like spiritually you're running on empty. Maybe mentally you're just, you just feel like, man, I just can't give another. Maybe physically. You're just running on empty. Does anybody here need a rescue today? Do you need a filling today? You just feel empty and, spiritually you're just a little empty. Man, I could sure use a touch. Does anybody need to be restored today?